Oh, look, it works. Okay, great. Yeah. So I've been working at home for like, I had an office for a little while, but working from home is way better. But I've been working from home for a long time, and I'm going to share a few insights. Hopefully, some of you guys will have the opportunity to transition to the home workplace. But you know, there's some pitfalls and some things that you kind of want to maybe look out for when you enter into like the work cave. The first is, of course, you make your own hours, which is great. But as you can probably guess, anybody who has gone through grad school knows that you can push yourself pretty hard when you've got a deadline. And I can definitely safely say that I've pulled many all-nighters and I've pulled 18-hour work days. And I've also like just not gone to work a couple of days. And that's an important thing to do. And it's important that your clients just never know about any of that. They need to not understand, like, they want to think, they need to think that you have a good work-life balance. You should have good work-life balance, but they shouldn't understand the exact dynamics of it, of how you do that. So the best way to do that is to kind of maintain the appearance of rigid work hours, right? So I don't answer the phone or answer any emails or anything like that. I don't do anything involving interacting with clients outside of the hours of 9 and 5. And just, Andrew Swift said the best thing a while back. He said, you got to train your clients like you train your dog. And it's totally true. If you answer an email at 11 o'clock at night once, you will have to answer every 11 o'clock email from that client forever. And if they're repeat clients, that's miserable. So we just have to pay attention to that. A few minor exceptions to that rule might be that, for example, like I had 2 separate clients that were going to major investment meetings. They were going to be going and talking to like billionaire investors to get their startup funded. And they had to have everything on time. And they had to have a couple of iteration cycles because it was hard science. You know, it had to be exactly accurate. So a lot was riding on it for them. And that, you know, that matters to me. I love my clients. So it mattered to me. And I made sure that they understood that I was working very hard and I was working at night and stuff like that to make this happen, but that was not normal and that I was considering myself to be working towards their benefit for this particular event, but that normally my hours are pretty normal, like pretty regular. And once that event had passed, I then went back to the don't answer emails after 5 o'clock. Even though they still send them at like midnight. I don't know how, like what kind of work culture they have. Also, make sure, take vacations, right? You're allowed to take a vacation. You work from home. The clients don't have to know that this is like your 5th vacation this year. You can just be like, oh, by the way, I'm gone between this day and that day. And they'll be like, oh, okay, well, you know, you're going to get us something beforehand? You'd be like, yeah, sure. And you'll be fine. So one thing that happens, like, presumably you're a great artist. You know, you have excellent work ethic, you do good work, and your clients love you, and you develop this great relationship with them, right? So they're always happy. They're always happy and smiling on the phone. They love to talk to you and stuff like that, and you'll start joking and so forth. It's important to maintain a barrier. So, like, you might talk about your kids a little bit if you have kids, but you don't need to talk about how, like, one of your kids has Tourette's and another one may be a pyromaniac. Like, you don't have to talk about that stuff. Also, I have had experiences where I've had vendors, right? Maybe a voice person, because I do animation, right? So I maybe a voice person, maybe an animation vendor, somebody who does some particular task for me. And the second they get too informal, I stop trusting them. Because once you start, like, you know, joking and being, you know, sloppy, right? Like emotionally and verbally sloppy, that impression translates to everything that you do. And so everyone in here, we're all friends, and so you know that I am naturally like verbally and emotionally sloppy, but never with my clients. My clients see me, like, I want my clients to always picture me wearing like a lab coat. That's what I want them to picture me wearing. And goggles, like gloves. But anyway, yeah, they're judging me. See that guy in the middle? That's who you got to deal with. That's what's going on. You don't see this happening, but that's what's going on. Another thing that's going to happen, like when you're working on your own, there's going to be failure. Like most of us have experienced some degree of failure at some point. If you're unlucky, then it's been like you've either come close to or experienced a catastrophic failure, like a missing of a critical deadline. Or if you are lucky, you may have just experienced the failure of having not met a client's particular expectations. Maybe they were unreasonable expectations, who knows? In all these kinds of circumstances, there may develop an adversarial kind of approach, especially when one of the client team, when their ass is on the line, they may want to start pointing fingers at the vendor about that. You got to let that happen, but you got to not rise to it. You don't want to produce any kind of excuse or defense. The best defense that you can do is to pretend they didn't say anything. Is to just if they say you didn't deliver this the way we wanted this, or I thought that you were going to make this, and then so what you got to hear, they're saying nonsense that says that it's your fault, and you know that it's not your fault because you don't make those kinds of mistakes. But what the actual thing that they're saying is that there is a problem. They're just identifying a problem, and they're doing it in like I'm trying to find a non-swear word, but they're doing it in an impolite manner. But they're really just trying to identify what the problem is. And if you take from that what the problem is, okay, so the problem is this. I suggest these ways of working around it. Then you can disarm the blame reflex and move past that and hopefully begin to repair this relationship, which hopefully hasn't been too tarnished. But under no circumstances, ever should you be adversarial with a client, even if they totally deserve it. And while we're on the failure topic, there was one time in my entire career where I came close to a catastrophic failure of missing a critical deadline, right? And it was because, when you're working for yourself, you kind of don't want to say no to projects because you don't know when the next one's coming. So you want to make sure that you take it all on. And in the beginning, you don't actually know what your capabilities are. So in my case, I didn't realize how long it was going to take to make a few projects. And so timelines were, I was working 20 hours a day, and timelines were really piling up. And my clients were emailing me, asking me for updates. And I'm glad I learned this lesson in the beginning. Hopefully you will never have to learn it firsthand. But yeah, so as the deadline approaches, your communication with the client needs to approach infinity, right? So as the deadline gets closer, you need to be more communicative. And the very first moment that you think that you may be missing a deadline, that this thing that we've identified as being a target, we may not be able to hit it, the first second you think that, the client needs to know, because their hearts need to be prepared for that kind of disappointment. And a lot of times, most of the deadlines that I operate with are deadlines that I tell the client. So if one of those begins to look unrealistic, I'll tell them 2 weeks out, hey, we're going to need to push it by 2 days. And I have already built into the whole system the flexibility necessary to make that happen. But there is a reflex. There's a reflex that as you get closer to missing a deadline and the client starts to email you and ask for updates and call you and stuff like that, you don't want to talk to them. You want to wait until you have good news to give them, because right now, if you give them news, it's bad news. And so, you don't want to talk to them. And I actually watched this particular type of flame out happen before, and it is ugly, ugly, ugly. Never happened to me, but the clients, once they reach that typing in all caps phase, you're never getting them back. They're never coming back. Always respond as soon as possible to any client email the same day. Even if they're just sending you information that is germane to a project, respond with a "got it" or "received." You know, any little acknowledgement so that they know that you are in the game. Also, overestimate your delivery time. So a client comes to me and says, hey, we have a 2-minute animation and it's this particular level of complexity. Give me the whole story. I know that I have these models already in my library. I know how long it's going to take me. I could tell you like down to within 2 hours how much time a lot of projects are going to take me. And like that might be 3 days of actual solid work. And I never, ever tell my clients that exact number. And the reason is, number one, is because I'm super duper fast. I'm like way fast. And my clients are going to be like, how are we paying you $1,000 an hour? Like, that is not cool. So I don't want them to have that piece of information. But the second is, that's if nothing else is happening. That's if my kids aren't throwing up. That's if I don't have more than one project. That's if I don't get an emergency call from another client that has an investor meeting. Like, that's if there are no variables, nothing is going to get in the way of the project. And something will always get in the way of the project. So you need to ask for a big window of time. Because a project is a card, and it's got to fit into your entire deck of cards. And every other aspect of your life is another card. They've all got to like go together. So when taking on a new project, ask for the maximum amount of time you can possibly have. And never, ever deliver early. So if it's due Friday and you finish it Monday, hang on to it. Now, I want you to know, I've worked with a few of you guys in here. I actually do deliver it as soon as it's done to you guys. Just letting you know that. But for the rest of them, for the folks that don't have their own curtain, right, this is all what goes on behind the curtain. So for those that don't know how the sausage is made, never deliver early. Because when you do that, you train the client to think that your deadlines are just like a worst case scenario deadline. You train your client to think that you're going to be working super duper hard and fast on their project, and your future deadlines will be the point at which it's late. So you need to set expectations for your clients. Hopefully every client is going to be a repeat client. You need to set expectations for your clients that are going to be not just realistic now, but realistic when things are hard. Yeah, in any case, they agreed to the deadline, so just give it to them then. Also, one other potential possibility is that when you give it to them early, they're like, hey, we found another couple of things that we want to change about it. We have some time. Why don't you go do it? So this thing that really should have taken you a much shorter amount of time now balloons into this thing that's going to take even more work. And what if you got it done early so that you could do other projects? And you delivered it early, but now the time that you had booked for your other projects is going to be used on this one that you delivered early. So, pull a Scotty. You know, like, I kind of do it in 2 weeks, but you have to do it in 2 weeks. Anyway, okay. If you don't know how to do it, don't take it on. This dovetails back into that thing I was talking about earlier about the flame out, the big, terrible, catastrophic failure. When I first started out, that one time I danced with death, it was because I didn't know, I assumed the software and the hardware that I had access to had certain capabilities, and I was mistaken. So you learn a lot with really difficult and painful projects, but I mean, half of what you learn is pain tolerance, and that's not something you need to know. Just don't assume that you'll figure it out, because you will drive yourself crazy. Right? You have to know when you're going into a project, you need to have a plan how you're going to do it, know what that plan is, know what the scope is going to be while you're doing while you're entering into the project, so that you're not like just flinging yourself into the abyss of the unknown. Yeah, so this is another important point. You got to be the organized one, because this is the dude you're giving your work to, right? Whatever you deliver is going to fall into whatever bottomless void that your client uses for organization. What if it's one folder on a shared drive that everybody accesses with everything from that entire account? Like, and your one file, your illustration, your animation is just going to go into there. And they're like, oh no, we'll just find it, just organized by file type or whatever. Like, there are clients that do that, like really multi-million-dollar companies that have 0 file organization systems. So you have to be the organized one. You have to expect your client to have that, and then for them to come back to you and be like, hey, we lost your file. I can't seem to find it. Do you know where it is? And when you deliver a file to them, you need to make sure, like, they may be mixing up the iterations. They may be using later ones or earlier ones or earlier iterations and saying, hey, I thought you made these changes, and you did, and they're just looking at the wrong one.